Hello and welcome to a special edition of the In the Money Players podcast. We're doing our mid-January Kentucky Derbies look, however you want to call it. We're going to be going through the runners that are part of this Kentucky Derby future wager that's open now and runs through this Sunday, the 22nd. We're going to put this piece up on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, and it's still the weekend this thing drops, you can move over to inthemoneypodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts to also hear our analysis of this Saturday's Golden Hour Pick 4. Elsewhere, we're going to have analysis of the coast-to-coast wagers. Lots of stuff, as ever, going on here at the In the Money Media Network. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Forte, coming to you from the Brooklyn Bunker once again, and joined by a man coming to us from the planet Texas. No, not that guy. The other guy from the planet Texas that we always have on these shows from inthemoneypodcast.com. He is Nick Tamaro. Nick, what's going on?
Doing great, Pete. Trying to hold off a sneeze, as everybody can see that's tuning in. So
you got to use the old theater trick. The old theater trick. You put your tongue on the roof of your mouth and you rub it as hard as you can, or you hit the mute button and you sneeze away. You know, you got options in the modern era.
Doesn't do the video any good, but yeah.
That's all right. Speaking of the video, we're going to give an opportunity here, a little contest. You can win a $20 free bet on this Kentucky Derby future wager. Leave a comment with the horse that you would bet or that you want to bet, and then we'll pick somebody at random. There you go. We'll pick somebody at random, and I'll reach out Sunday morning and give that person the bet. And then we'll do some, just for fun, we'll do some runner-ups. We'll give out some free months of In the Money Plus, which we've had some good content on lately. And we'll do that as well. So just leave a comment on the YouTube video. If you're listening, head over to the In the Money Media YouTube channel. Just search for In the Money Media over on youtube.com if you're a bit of a Luddite and don't know what I mean instantly, and pop that comment in there, and we'll give out some stuff, because that's always fun too, and you get the conversation going in the comments, and that drives people to watch and listen as well. Not a bad thing. So we're going to start off by we're going to use the future wager as our guide, and we've never done this before. We have decided, and I've said this on other shows, we're being more Derby focused this year. It's a case of giving the people what they want. We know from the surveys, we know from the traffic that, the Derby really drives a lot of interest. And we're going to embrace that this year instead of being a little old fashioned and saying, we don't want to do it until after the mile and an eighth preps are run. We're taking a different approach this year. Hopefully it's not just going to help us do a deeper dive on the Derby, but it's going to help us find some winners along the way. We've got, in the main, two main Derby preps this weekend. One is an allowance race at Fairgrounds, and the other is the Lecomte. We'll inevitably talk about those along the way. Also going to have a special show on the plus side. I got to make sure he's still around. I talked to him earlier in the week. Frank McGoey going to be joining us over there. If you want to learn more about In the Money Plus, you can go to inthemoneypodcast.com/plus. But enough business side of things. Let's dive in, and we're going to start off talking about a horse called Angel of Empire, who ran very well in a fast-looking race. But this was the victory formation race, his stablemate. So I'm not sure from here if I can tell you many reasons why Angel of Empire is going to get better than that one. The other interesting thing I noted just looking at the Angel of Empire PPs, thought it was a little odd that this horse started at a mile and then went to turf in start 2, though that could have just been because of the big purses at Kentucky Downs. Jury very much out on Angel of Empire for me, Nick. Do you have any interest in this one at this stage?
Yeah, the old $253,000 allowance at Kentucky Downs certainly is going to lure a few. Looked like Brad Cox's secondary player in that Smarty Jones, and ran like a secondary player, but ran very well to be second. So, no harm in taking a look at Angel of Empire as a horse that might be interesting for a bet, maybe in the Rebel or a race similar to that sort. Looks very hard to imagine that he'll be any kind of real factor on the Derby trail, though.
Sounds right. Why don't we go every other one here? You want to lead the discussion on the horse you see the brisk PP on the screen now, Arctic Arrogance?
Yeah, so the Broman homebred, New York bred Arctic Arrogance comes in with consecutive runner-up finishes at Aqueduct, both of which featured pretty confident lookbacks from Jose Lezcano at the quarter pole, only to be outfinished each time. I'm interested in this horse running back in the Withers to see how he performs. Linda Rice is pretty adamant that distance is his friend. I'm just left wanting a little bit from those last two.
I think I want to see blinkers for Arctic Arrogance at this point. It just feels like maybe something that would move this horse forward in a race like that. We'll see what happens. Nick, I have this feeling that you and I are going to be dead and buried, and Linda Rice is still going to be waiting on word of her appeal.
There's no question about it. There's we might see 4 Olympics before Linda Rice Linda Rice ends up getting her appeal handled.
Number 3 in the betting for this wager is Banishing, this Brendan Walsh trainee. Impressive maiden winner back on Boxing Day, coming off an impossible trip on probably the wrong part of the track on debut. Interestingly, not back. No, this horse is one of the ones in the allowance race, right? So we'll learn a lot more about Banishing this weekend, or is this horse off this weekend?
I will admit a little neglect there in not seeing whether he was in the allowance race. He is in the allowance race. He is in the 9th on Saturday at Fairgrounds. He is in there with 2 other horses actually that are on this list, including Tapit's Conquest and Tapit's Shoes, both from Brad Cox's barn. And he is the 2-1 morning line favorite. Determinedly, who beat one of the horses we're going to talk about a little later on, is in there as well. So very, very interesting allowance race. And if you remember correctly, there was an allowance race last year on Lecomte Day that featured a faster final time than the Lecomte. It was a race that was won by a horse named Cyberknife.
Went on to have some impact on the trail. Yeah, this is one I want to see, and this is a horse I think is there's more questions than answers at this point, but it has a cool pedigree and looks like the deserving favorite in that salty looking allowance race, and we'll learn a lot more as we go forward.
Yeah, sort of a good bad Godolphin pedigree, right? A lot of good names in it, but not really a lot of production. I'm not all that concerned about that. I'll admit, Pete, I thought this horse was really good in his maiden win. He had push button acceleration. He got to the lead. I thought Brian Hernandez Jr. switched him off. It was the odd route on Timeform US that was fast early, slow middle, and then he finished up relatively well, all things considered. So he's a very interesting horse, and one that looks like distance will be no issue.
Yeah, you can see that same dynamic playing out on the Briss pace figures. I'll admit, I don't use the Briss PPs very often, but I love the way they look at the world with the par figures up top and then showing you the E1, E2, and LP in addition to the final time. Why don't you bring us forward with the next horse who people will be familiar with?
Yeah, next one up's Blazing Sevens, Grade 1 winner, having taken the Champagne last year in the slop, and was a good 4th, all things considered, in the juvenile, and looked the way Verifying came back and ran in his 3-year-old debut. There's reason to believe that horses like Blazing Sevens have a forward move in them. Slight concern at this point, no works. I know we're in a no work at this point situation with Forte as well, so it's probably by design, but it sure would be nice to see Blazing Sevens get to the track relatively soon. I would imagine that Chad Brown is looking at a 2 prep type of approach. So we might not see him anyway until a race like the Fountain of Youth or potentially the Risen Star, which is where he ran Zandon. I think you could probably pencil in the Zandon schedule for Blazing Sevens. Of course, I mean, the Fountain of Youth is only 6 weeks away. So we're going to need to see Blazing Sevens back on the work tab soon.
Yeah, very, very soon, I would think. I mean, I suppose the biggest question here is that in the big win did get a great setup, and that was a sloppy track. But as you point out, the BC Juvenile run was pretty good, all things considered. You can see there on screen the 100 late pace number on Briss, and that was a new top. So if this is a developing horse, I mean, again, like we're going to say this about so many of these, the jury is out, but very interesting. And, we're going to have more information in short order as it pertains to Blazing Sevens. We could talk about the Keith DeSormo trainee confidence game. Next, won the maiden at Churchill, allowed to clear very easily. Looked good enough there, has worked okay since. You need to see a bunch more from this horse, I would say. I guess my negative comment would be, has had so many more starts than most of these, might be a bit exposed at this point to get too excited about.
Yeah, super interesting dam side pedigree being out of a Blue Hassan, who of course is a sister of Zenyatta. So there's a lot of distance in play here. Feels like a horse that's probably a slightly better version of Keith DeSormo's Lecomte upset winner in 2022. Call Me Midnight, different running style completely. I hope that when he runs in the Lecomte tomorrow, they're aggressive with him as they were last time out. One thing I'll say about this horse, He's gotten the worst of it pace-wise on multiple occasions and really hasn't run all that bad other than the Iroquois when he was a little bit too close and wide chasing that pace. Probably not a Derby horse, but a better horse than he looks on paper.
I could accept that. I could accept that notion. Take us through to the next one.
Yeah, Corona Bolt's up next, the son of Boldoro, who's 2 for 2. Took the Sugar Bowl at second asking. I think he's a little dressed up. I thought he's taken advantage of some slow paces in each of his first 2 starts. So I'm not a particularly big fan. Interestingly, Brad Cox stretching out with graded stakes horses on dirt. I know this is not applicable as far as a future wager goes. 16% with just an 88-cent ROI. Not something that Brad does all that great. So we'll see where Corona Bolt ends up landing. I get the feeling, Pete, that ultimately distance-wise, this horse tops out at about 7 to 8 furlongs.
That's interesting. I mean, and this is a horse that's going to be bet off the giant, 97 buyer, and you're making some good cases about why that might not be that relevant. I will point out this one working with Jace's Road, who we'll get to in a little bit. Curly Jack is up next. This is a tough horse and a horse you'd love to own, a hard trier. But this is a horse that's run 6 times, and the figures are all in a pretty narrow band that make it hard for me to see the improvement that would be needed to beat the fastest of these in a race like the Kentucky Derby. Still, though, hard-trying horses like this still strike me as ones that may have a valuable prize somewhere on his resume forward at some stage. I just can't really make you a case it would be the Kentucky Derby until he gets considerably faster than what we've seen. But, I don't mean to denigrate what we've seen from this horse either.
No, seems unlikely he takes a big step forward at 3, given how exposed his form is. I think he's definitely outrun expectations by Good Magic out of Connie and Michael, who finished 3rd in the Mother Goose in her best effort. This is a horse who upset the Iroquois, came back and disappointed a tad in the juvenile with maybe an overly aggressive ride. I like that Tom Amoss is trying to kind of race him into a spot. He's already back working in advance of his 3-year-old debut. I'll give you an interesting stat. How many starts has Tom Amoss had in 3-year-old graded stakes races for colts pre-Derby in the last 5 years?
How many starts total?
How many starts total?
I mean, I would have thought it would have been a fairly sizable number.
5.
Really?
Uncharted territory for Tom Amoss. Yeah, I mean,
interesting.
Excellent trainer, just not somebody that's had a lot of really big-time 3-year-old colts. You have to go back to Mo Tom to get a horse that was really on the trail for him. So not to say that Tom can't have a horse ready in a situation like this, but it's something where, he's just not been down this road all that often.
That's interesting. I mean, it suggests somebody who's not interested in just being there to be there. He goes right when the horse takes him, and this horse certainly has the resume to try moving forward, and we'll see. And that term, for those that don't know, when you talk about a horse being exposed, it just means we have a really good sense of what they are and how good they are based on the number of based on what they've shown us on the track. And when you see, again, that fairly narrow band of speed figures, we're looking at the Briss, it's even more narrow on the buyer scale. It just gives us a little bit of skepticism if the needed improvement will be there. But these horses surprise us all the time.
On to who I think is a really interesting horse, Cyclone Mischief, who came back out of the Kentucky Jockey Club to win a One Other Than at Gulfstream. It had the look of a bit of a salty One Other Than. It featured the impressive debut winner Rudder's Men from Aqueduct, as well as an impressive debut winner in Litigate, who we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes. But it was Cyclone Mischief's day, and he looked like a winner every step of the way. Very impressive run. Dale Romans slated to bring him back in the Holy Bull the first weekend of February. This is a horse who ran, by modern standards, somewhat frequently as a 2-year-old, and now comes back for an early season 3-year-old tilt. I'll give you my Kentucky Jockey Club opinion now, because I think this is probably the most appropriate time to do it, other than when we talk about instant coffee. I really had a hard time figuring out what to do with the Kentucky Jockey Club, because it had a very weird look to it. It was slow on the final time because the pace was exceptionally slow. In watching that race numerous times and now analyzing the horses coming out of it, I think it was one of those slow-paced races that drastically hurt the speed horses. They allowed the late runners to get way too close. They turned this thing into a quarter-mile sprint, and a horse like Cyclone Mischief is at a decided disadvantage against a horse like Instant Coffee or even Dennington when you're talking about a quarter-mile sprint with only a half to three-quarter length advantage. So we've seen Western Ghent come back and run well. We've seen Cyclone Mischief come back and run well. I'm going to be very intrigued with how the the closers run versus how the horses that were up on the pace were run. And I think, unfortunately, we missed the wedding with Cyclone Mischief at 5.5 to 1 in his next start, but you really want to upgrade the horses that were close to the pace that day.
We don't compare notes before the show, but this is just funny. I'll read it right from my notes. Not sure exactly what was going on when he went away so tamely, 2 back, but it's conceivable he's the type better off going faster early, and he improved so much last time. I think he's one of the more interesting runners we're going to talk about on the show today going forward. And, maybe I'm influenced a little bit by how enthusiastic the inimitable Dale Romans is about this one. But I mean, this is a serious racehorse who's definitely worthy of thinking about. What do they, let's see, it's up on the screen there now. What did they hang on this horse on the
40 to 1? Yeah, 40 to 1 on the morning line. Only fly in the ointment, I would say, is that he was treated with Lasix in the One Other Than win. We'll see if he's as productive maybe without it. But yeah, I mean, you see on the screen a big jump in Brisnet speed figures of 18 points. He improved 11 points on the buyer scale. And if you're around a 90 in January of your 3-year-old season, I think you're ultimately in the conversation.
I want to take a second to put in a plug for Eric DeCoster and the work that he and Eric Solomon have been doing over on InTheMoneyPodcast.com. He's got an analysis of this market as well, and I love the way he grouped the horses and has some very astute comments in there. Everybody should go and check that one out as well. Maybe I'll pop that in the show notes for this one as well. Next up, number 9, Disarm. This is a horse that, for a very, very brief window in Saratoga, had there been a Kentucky Derby future book, a horse that would have probably been at the top of the market there. There was a lot of chatter after that maiden win. The race didn't end up being very productive in terms of winners, but the figure has been frank. The horses who've come back have suggested that 86, and as an August 2-year-old figure, that's very strong. This is the gun runner Tapit cross we'll probably talk about a few times. I mean, this horse, to state the obvious, major player if he's trained on, but the word if doing a lot of work in that sense.
Yeah, one work coming back, so a lot of real estate ahead of him in terms of maybe getting to a One Other Than in advance of a stake try. I don't think they're going to really have the time to do that unless this is a one-shot deal, right? They'll have one prep in order to get him enough points to get there. You can probably maybe see him getting to a race like the Rebel. I'm sorry, the Rebel is earlier than it used to be, so it's probably not. Maybe a backdoor type that looks to the New Mexico route or something like that. But it's given the representation the Winchell Thoroughbreds has, I don't think they're going to push Disarm to get there. But, no doubt about it, Pete, his maiden win was very, very impressive. It didn't come back coming out of it as impressive as I thought it would be. It was Whitney Day. There were a couple of 2-year-old races that day. Look, it was a good effort, and it was a solid move forward for a horse that clearly has ability. We'll see if he's able to get there in one piece.
You make a good point like that. It's that idea of a one prep Derby with one start as a 2. Even by modern standards, that seems like quite the reach. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, one allowance race, one graded stake, that might be it. Let's go to Dubyuhnell, a horse that we talked about extensively after the Remsen, a winner of 2 straight, both of which came on sloppy and sealed racetracks. I'll tell you what, there was magic in those blinkers because this horse has not only improved in his last 2 starts, but he is wildly outrunning his pedigree. I mean, this is as sprinty and fast looking a pedigree as you're going to find for a horse that's now a grade 2 winner at 9 furlongs. So I'm very intrigued by how he ends up shaking out. I'm a big fan of the West Paces Racing silks as well. They're a very announcer friendly pair of silks with their orange and white stripes and blue sleeves. So, all kidding aside, this is a horse who ran well last time out, and Arctic Arrogance did nothing to make him look bad. I think he is going to take the New York route there and run in the Withers in advance of the Wood Memorial. So I'll admit I'm intrigued by Dubyuhnell.
I think we can put all the Remsen as a negative key race chatter to bed after last year. I mean, it's impressive when a horse can do what this horse has done. 2 straight wins in the slop, big improving figure pattern. I mean, this horse looks like 40 to 1 or so shot from here for a race like the Derby. And that's not nothing from this far out. Let's talk about another one of the Asmussen runners that made a splash at Saratoga, number 11, Echo again. This is another gun runner Tapit cross. This horse is yet to run back to that first race in terms of how impressive it looked. 2 L's at short prices. And really, looking at the pedigree, if it wasn't Kentucky Derby season, I'd be just saying turn back, turn back, turn back. So, Derby fever does stuff to people, though. So who knows? Am I underrating this one, or do you see it similarly?
So the interesting thing about Echo again is he was in a route on the main track at Churchill that ended up getting stopped in the middle of the race, and he was well in front and cruising. And
Okay.
so coming out of that, you felt like, okay, well, maybe Echo again can go along. And then he had this incredibly underwhelming performance at Remington, which is not only a place where Steve Asmussen has probably won, 10 plus training titles. He lost to Wildatlanticstorm, who wasn't exactly on anybody's radar as a potential Derby horse. So it was a mediocre effort. And now the Lecomte feels like it's really, really important. I got called a namby-pamby and other things on Twitter after his debut because I was not bowled over by it. I thought that field was terrible. Combined coming out of there, there's one win. Summon Your Courage is still a maiden. He is a horse that just lost and got a 75 time from US figure at Turfway. So, and I also felt like Echo again really got the best of it on the front end. 22-2 going 6.5 furlongs at Saratoga is walking. So I think he's dressed up. Not for me. I agree. I'm in your camp. I think a cutback's in order.
All right, we'll let you continue. You mentioned the Winchell camp before. This is an interesting representative from it.
Yeah, the other EA horse from Winchell Thoroughbreds, Extra Anejo, who some idiot made 4-1 on debut on the morning line at Keeneland, only for the $1.35 million purchase to just run off the screen. This is a horse that, I don't do much as far as looks and things like that. Confirmation to me is the third sacrament that you go through. I don't know much about it, but this horse obviously has an incredible look to him because his pedigree is not worth $1.35 million. It's a turfy dam side. I know he's an into Mischief. That's a lot of money for a colt. And this is an outfit that is really not known for paying exorbitant sums of money. Well, he ran to it. I mean, he was outstanding. That is not a race that's come back as particularly productive either. But it's one of those situations where I don't even know how much it matters because he ran fast. He didn't exactly have anything that went his way that you could attribute to a lucky type of trip. The problem with him is that they started training him after his debut. They stopped, and now they're trying to start again. So he's clearly a horse with some issues, and I'm not going to be surprised if he ends up being a really significant late season player, though Asmussen says he is slated to get going again soon.
Yeah, a lot of these are possible summer horses. This one, I will just echo everything you said. I mean, clearly a horse that that physically has impressed a lot of industry people and was terrific on debut. And it's one of those things. And you could make this case about Echo again as well, but I think it's more appropriate in the Extra Anejo case because we've seen other form from Echo again since. When you win by 7 geared down, I'm less concerned about the fact that 4 of the 5 to run back have seen figure regression, so because there's going to be so much time between those starts. And I mean, there's a lot going on here with this horse that ran a 92 buyer under those circumstances. Looks to me, the 20-1 or so that this horse probably will end up being, it's still probably too short, not because of ability, but just because of all the attendant questions. Let's talk about a horse that I feel like in the past, Nick, would be a much bigger favorite than he is right now, and that's a Forte. This horse has a sparkling resume in traditional terms for what makes a mid-January Kentucky Derby future favorite. We're dealing with a 2-year-old champ, experience at Class Edge, 4 victories, 3 grade 1s, the form of that juvenile looking excellent, verifying just the latest example of that. This horse is bred to go longer, I think, in the right hands. I wouldn't blame anybody who took 10-1 right now on this horse, honestly. I mean, I'm not cutting in line to bet it, and there's so many with upside, but I mean, this horse, I just feel like comparatively just such a known commodity and has that foundation that we used to look for in Kentucky Derby potential runners before sort of the world changed in the last 10, 15 years about the type of conditioning and pedigrees even that win this race. Where do you stand with Forte at this point?
Yeah, got a little Rodney Dangerfield to him, right? 3 straight grade 1 wins, never less than 4-1. And really just sort of, one of the more decorated 2-year-old champions that we've seen in the last 10 years. Him and game winner Nyquist were horses that won multiple grade 1s, including with their third one being the juvenile. So, I wonder what it is about him that just doesn't really draw the public to him. And it does feel like, probably 12-1 or so is a fair price. There's clearly an element of this Kentucky Derby future wager that we've not touched on, which is that one trainer's horses are not part of the betting field. And he has a lot of them. So that probably contributes a little bit to the price and maybe drives the field's price down a little bit more. So if you like Forte, you're going to get more value. But he's among the fastest horses in the group, if not the fastest. He's got what looks like it would be an ideal type of running style in that he's an off the pace type, but he's not a plotter. And I'm not going to argue with anybody that wants to take a big stand on Forte at this point. He's a deserving champion, and right now he's wearing the crown.
Brad Cox has so many of these. Kind of an interesting one, maybe, that we're going to lead us in discussion of next.
Yeah, Giant Mischief, a son of Into Mischief, who probably surprised Brad a little bit and this ownership group with his win in the maiden event at Horseshoe Indianapolis, where he won at 13-10 and really just exploded late after he got into some trouble going into the turn, and came back. And it was his second start that really was the eye opener, because he beat the well-fancied Arabian Lion with a slick rail run under Florent Giroux. His springboard mile was a little bit, it wasn't disappointing. It was not expected because he was expected to win. He was 4-5. He had a brutal trip, got out of the gate poorly, didn't have much go his way along the way. Another horse who's outrunning his pedigree, Vertical Oak, was a very nice sprinter for the Robinsons and Steve Asmussen about 5, 6, 7 years ago. He's going to the Rebel. I don't know how far this horse wants to go, Pete. I think he might be the type that just runs his heart out a couple of times on the trail, and then we see him in the Pate Mile.
Yeah, that's not a bad call at all based on what we've seen. I just was very inclined to be forgiving the last day because of, as you mentioned, the trip, and also the fact that was a pace that really held together. This was the closer, the only closer that got involved. And
you got to give him one shot as a 3-year-old. You've got to give him one shot in a graded stake. If he runs in the money, you're probably giving him another shot. You owe it to him.
I do not hate the idea. 40-1 on the morning line is just the price, right? But like, this is a horse I could feel like could get lost somewhere, maybe in an international book where you could do like an each way type bet. If you could get 100, this would be the kind, which I wouldn't rule out at all, given the depth of the field. I'm just a little bit interested to see what happens with this horse, even though your call about distance getting in the way might be a little bit more realistic. I just there's something about this horse that intrigues me a little bit at this stage. Let's talk about number 15, Gulfport. Speedy sort who always gets hammered at the windows. On the bare form, another one just looks like might be better going shorter to me, though the ardent supporters, and they're obviously out there from the way this horse gets bet, may want to give another try going longer just because of the slop in the champagne. But I think I'm going to take the cynical view. Best figure was that 91 back in July going 6. Turn him back, let him roll is what I think.
Yeah, likely a horse who was ahead of the curve. And, it goes to show you how much support the public ends up giving a lot of these early season winners. Felt like Gulfport probably was the quintessential 9th grader playing 6th grade basketball for a while. And so he kind of stuck out. And once the pack caught up to him, he was a little underwhelming in each of his last 2 starts. One excuse, couple of wet tracks, maybe not a wet track type. He's got 2 workouts on the comeback trail, so probably a horse we're going to look at around Risen Star time.
That makes perfect sense to me. More Asmussen up next, Nick, and I'll let you start.
Gun Pilot, a son of Gunrunner, one of numerous gun runners that Steve Asmussen has in his barn. This one was an impressive maiden winner at Churchill back in November, came back to be second in that allowance race against Verifying, which you and I talked about pretty extensively earlier in the week. Good pedigree here, no doubt about it. 3 Chimneys homebred. Looks like a horse with some upside. Doesn't really look like at this point he's scaring anybody out of a Derby trail race. So, he's only got 2 starts, right? So his next start is going to be incredibly important.
Yeah, so much upside, so many questions. The second to Verifying being the claim to fame. Of course, that was with Lasix. I'll just note that I love this Blood Gun Runner by a Smart Strike Dam. Really interesting, but another just with so many questions. We'll see what happens. I don't have a ton to say about number 17, Hit Show, though I do kind of enjoy the name. More Brad Cox quality here. Progressive allowance type, but needs to get faster to be like seriously in this conversation. But when you have nearly 40 horses to talk about, certainly deserves the spot in the pack.
Yeah, I'll admit I'm intrigued by this horse. I think there's a real excuse for his effort to back. Florent got him a little out of position. It was a very pace dominated race. Confidence game wired. Rocket Ken was close the whole way. Came back with a very nice effort, albeit first time Lasix. Still slow. Going to need to get better. Might be more of a long term project. The damn actress won the Comely and ended up running in the Houston Ladies Classic. She was trained by the now disgraced Jason Service. And is a horse that that was good distance wise. So I do think that there might be some long term upside in Hit Show. He's just going to have to improve fast.
This next Cox runner is one that I think will be on a lot of people's lists. I'm very curious to get your take because he's shown so much talent, but another that just in the speed figure department might be a little bit lacking.
So really, test my Kentucky Jockey Club theory, right? Because if you believe that the closers were at an advantage, I guess nobody had more of an advantage than Instant Coffee, who ran very impressively on debut, running a figure that was much better, running a final time that was much faster than his fellow 2-year-olds on the same card on closing weekend at Saratoga. And, the Breeders' Futurity was not a bad effort by any means, maybe a little too much too soon. And then I thought he came back and validated his good debut win in the Kentucky Jockey Club. So, you're really tuned into the Lecomte tomorrow to see how this horse runs. That's really, the one thing that sticks out above all, because he looks like potential wise. I mean, he could have very, very serious potential. And if he does, he'll show it right away.
That point about the Kentucky Jockey Club and trying to figure out what was going on there is such a good one. And it makes the Lecomte a little hard for me to confidently find a bet in, because I could just argue the Instant Coffee run in there out of both sides of my mouth, like kind of all day long. You could say maybe flattered by being invited into the race, maybe had ideal conditions to lay down that very fast late pace figure you can see on the brisk scale there. And it wasn't like an easy trip, but it might be that overall dynamic of being invited in the race made it easier to overcome the odd position he was in than it would have been in a truly run race. We'll have a lot more clues tomorrow as it pertains to Instant Coffee and the rest of the runners, not only in the Lecomte, but maybe coming out of the Kentucky Jockey Club as well. Number 19, Jace's Road, we talked about a little bit before, the one who's been working with Corona Bolt. Won the Gun Runner with a real easy trip, but another case where it was a solid time and did so wrapped up. And a horse, when you look at these PPs, you can say in the old days, you'd say, oh, well, this horse has some good foundation. What do you think his potential is for West Point and the Outlaws?
I guess hates slot maybe is the story. That's the rationale for I mean, he lost his mind a little bit before the Street Sense anyway. I thought he had a pretty easy trip in the Gun Runner on the front end, but look, horses like this are going to make their own trip more often than not. So I think I'd be careful about dismissing him too readily, but I would also have a hard time truly embracing him fully, because he has to show that he can win and run at a high level without circumstances really being in his favor. He did run well in the Iroquois, all things considered. I mean, that pace was very, very strong. He was the only horse who stayed on. Scroll up and look at Echo against PPs. That pace absolutely slaughtered him. So I think this is a horse with some upside, no doubt about it. He's got some ability. I want to see him do it with a little adversity.
I think that's fair. You tipped your hand about this next runner you're going to lead the discussion of when we talked about him earlier in the week.
Yeah, recent maiden winner Kingsbarns, who scored on debut back on Saturday at Gulfstream, did it in a fast-paced race. He was close the whole way. I'll tell you what, his Brisnet running line looks really, really good, especially in comparison to his buyer figure. Just a buyer figure of 74, but the Brisnet number 95. I'll be intrigued to see what kind of Thorograph number we see. This feels like a performance that's really pace oriented. He got a 99 time form US. The pace again was strong early. This horse was very mature. He was stuck behind horses. He was in a little tight. He ended up getting a path. You and I talked on Tuesday about how the second and third place finishers came from the backfield. So it was a good race when you stack it up and look at it at any type of breakdown in terms of race flow and things like that. The pedigree's interesting. Dam is a half to Gossip Girl, who was a grade 1 winner at 10 furlongs for Tom Albertrani. It was on the turf, but still, this is a horse with some distance in his pedigree. Part of the reason why they went for 800K. I'll admit, I find this horse very intriguing.
I'll keep an eye on what happens in the market with this one because of that low buyer figure. And that's really interesting to see the time form better, the Brisnet better still, if you try to compare them apples to apples. If this horse is 100-1 or so, like, I wouldn't blame anybody who took a flyer, just given the hands he's in. What do you think's gonna? Are you shaking your head that that'll never happen, or?
No, I'm saying he's a great bet. I mean, $40 at 100-1. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to do that.
Let's talk about number 21, Litigate. This horse, second to Cyclone, Mischief. Horse to keep on the radar. Could improve with more ground, given the stout pedigree with Blame and Mineshaft in there. I don't have much else to say other than that. Probably not one I'm interested in pouncing on now, but another horse I could listen to a case for. It's just it's hard. It's hard for me to make the exact argument why the form's going to get reversed with Cyclone, Mischief. But again, one could try that.
Yeah, I mean, when you're trying to figure out how to make up 6 lengths on a 40-1 shot in this pool, then you're probably talking about a horse that's got a little too much work to do. Maybe one that ends up being better going shorter too, based on that good debut. Next up on our list is Loggins, who is a horse that admittedly, and Pete and I, full disclosure, do have some connection to part of the connections. This is a horse that is probably not likely to make the Derby. He is a horse that's been given. Marcus Hirsch asked Brad Cox about him recently, and he is hopeful to get him back in training in the next 30 days. So that does not augur well for his ability to make this race. Talking about Loggins the horse, I mean, Pete and I are going to gush about Loggins the horse. He's a horse who ran very well on debut in a productive race, came back and ran the best race by a mile in the Breeders' Futurity. I don't know where Loggins will surface again, Pete, but when he does, I can't wait to see how he runs.
Yeah, you said it all there. Given the trips, such a terrific run last out, good form coming out of that. Going to need some major luck to make the Derby, but as we said before, looks like an interesting summer horse. Another horse we've talked about recently on the shows is number 23, Lugan Knight, tenacious in victory in the Jerome, which also gave that form boost to Victory Formation, who we'll get to. Have to say, look kind of small and sprinty on TV. And Michael McCarthy, the excellent trainer, has voiced some uncertainty about how far this one wants to go. So I don't think I would be betting at this point, but a cool, tough horse who I think will be heard from this season.
Yeah, major credit to the connections, who were super realistic coming out of that race. They were like giving every reason in the world why they didn't want to run him any farther. So you have to appreciate anybody that even the connections that just won a Kentucky Derby points race, talking about how they don't really have Derby dreams. I think they're being realistic. I think they're going to do what's right for him. And he was, as you said, he was tenacious in victory in the Jerome, very game holding off Arctic Arrogance. Just might end up being a really nice horse around one turn.
Yeah, and if he wins again next time, if he drags him to the Derby, he'll go. It's not like he doesn't deserve his place in this market, but big price for sure.
No doubt about it. Next up is Practical Move, who is has a really turfy dam side pedigree. Recent Los Alamitos Futurity winner. They ended up breeding that turfy dam, of course, to one of the worst turf influences in Kentucky right now. Practical joke. But this is a horse who put it all together in the Los Al Futurity. Beat the 3-headed monster from Bob Baffert's barn in there going away. He broke his maiden via disqualification. One thing you can say about this horse is take a look at those running lines. Cave Rock, National Treasure, Having a Meltdown, Newgate. He has faced the absolute best out west at that given time. It seems like Bob Baffert's arsenal gets replenished every few weeks, but he is battle tested. He has now run his 2 best races, in my opinion, going long. So, a long way from being a real Derby contender, but definitely a horse that has a little intrigue to him.
That Los Al Futurity is another one where you got a lot of figure disagreement. Big fat Briss number staring you in the face there. Came back in 88 on the Beyer speed figure scale. So I'm tempted to take a wait and see approach, but you're making some rock solid points about this one. Safi Joseph Jr. Gets a call with number 25, Prairie Hawk, this runner who is won 2 in a row, including that Tampa allowance race the last day, and presumably will be seen down there next. Certainly has a bit to find and figures in form with the best of these we're talking about. Do you see anything in this one to highlight?
No, the story of that Tampa allowance win was that he beat a couple of backed fancied Todd Pletcher 3-year-olds that one had just broken his maiden. And somebody kind of had to win there. The Brisnet figure progression looks a lot better than the Beyer speed figure progression. He's went from 51 to 70 to 80, so still pretty slow. But a horse that has some ability, maybe long term might move forward. But at this point, it's hard to endorse.
Yeah, Lasix probably helped there, and looking at Briss, look just to be able to control things and finish. And yeah, we'll see what happens with that one.
Finished well enough, at least. Let's go on to Recruiter, the Florida bred, who is 4 for 4, having won the Parks Juvenile last time out at Parks back on January 3rd. Cal Lynch trainee will go around 2 turns, presumably in his next start. Not sure where that's going to be. Perhaps a race like the Withers, given that Lynch is based in the Mid-Atlantic. You would be a shorter ship up to Aqueduct to run in there. Maybe a Maryland backdoor for a race or two, maybe the private terms in advance of the Tessio and a look towards the Preakness. But Recruiter looks like a nice sprinter to me.
Yeah, that's that. I don't really have anything to add whatsoever. Number 27 is Rocket Can for Bill Mott. This horse who didn't look like we'd be talking about him for the Derby at all after the 2 Saratoga runs, but has improved somewhat mightily since then. Can he keep improving? Can he be a player in this trail for the Fletcher operation?
I'll tell you what, for what it's worth, this horse has the best dam side pedigree for distance of any of these horses. He is really bred on the dam side to go long. There's a lot of when you dig deeper into it, there's a lot of distance pedigree here. So he is a horse that unsurprisingly got a lot better when they sent him long. If you remember, there was some chatter about this horse prior to his debut. He went off 5-1 in the face of Disarm in that Whitney Day maiden race, and Disarm was 9-5 in there. So there was a lot of money on him. He probably got the wrong trip going 7/8 to second asking, and then boom, he got a lot better very quickly. I still think there's upside here, and I'm intrigued by seeing where he ends up running next. Maybe a Sam Davis horse. We've seen Bill Mott do that in the past. Yeah. He won it a few years ago. So I'm gonna put a few shackles on Rocket Can at probably what'll end up being 100+ to 1.
Yeah, it's a compelling case for a horse who's going to be a very big price.
No doubt about it. Let's go to Shesterkin, second-time starter who scored on debut, not as the favorite, a rare Todd Pletcher first-time starter who won at Gulfstream that was not favored. Son of Violence now will presumably go long in his next start. Not sure the quality of that field, but he seemed to do it the right way, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, so many of these horses, so many of the recent maiden winners, that's one of the categories in the Eric DeCoster piece. It's very hard to, come up with any prediction about what's going to happen next. But this one did what you'd want to see on debut, certainly in the right hands to continue to be heard from. We'll see where they turn up next. Has there been any chatter about what they're going to do? Do you think they're going to look for an allowance race or go into the deep end of the pool?
I wonder, there aren't usually an abundance of one other thans at Gulfstream for 3 years because they want you running the stakes.
Yeah.
So, they probably might try and take a slightly more conservative route. I wouldn't be shocked to see him at Tampa, maybe in advance of a couple opportunities after that. But I would say, they'll probably look to something around early to mid-February.
29 is another one of these maiden winners recently, Shopper's Revenge, who won in wire-to-wire fashion at Oaklawn, and was able to do that with the benefit of Lasix. I sort of throw up my hands with this one. Another just more questions than answers. And boy, is Tapit well represented in this Derby future pool.
He sure is. And I'll tell you what, you want to talk about dam side pedigrees. I mean, this horse has had to stop charging Maria, who won the Breeders' Cup Distaff and the Alabama. So a lot of reason to believe that he's going to be good going longer. Also, the dam is a half to Vindictive, who finished second in the Pimlico Special back in 2022, which is a 1 3/16 race. This is a horse who had nothing go his way on debut. He had everything go his way second time out, and he ran off the screen. So, it's just going to become a question of, did it have to do with the lead? Did it have to do with the Lasix? Did it have to do with experience? We'll find out in his next start. Next up on the list, we have Signator for Shug McGahee, who is by Tapit out of the mare Pension. He was an impressive second out maiden winner after checking in second on debut. Feels like a horse that the public is just going to lap up wherever they land next. In fact, the morning line here sort of indicates that this horse is slow, and he's 40 to 1 on the morning line. He's half the price of horses that have run decidedly better than him. Not for me, Pete.
Yeah, it's always a little bit hard when the McGahee runners they catch money. They're easy to dream on. This pedigree is very very easy to dream on. Need to wait and see. But I mean, boy, for this horse to be bet the way he's been in his 2 starts, it wouldn't shock me at all if there's more under the hood. I just don't need to pay to find out at this point. Number 31 is Sun Thunder for Kenny McPeak. Recently won by 6.5 at Oaklawn Park as well. Another horse, has profile very, very similar to a lot of these. And, they seems like every horse in this race, we either have some Tapit blood, some Into Mischief blood, or a little bit of both. This is another son of Into Mischief, going to be a 3-figure price in this pool. I don't see a reason to pounce yet, but you don't have to be right too often when you're betting horses at numbers like that.
Yeah, if you could bet some trifectas with him keyed in third, that'd probably be the best thing. He looks like a huge clunk up type, but good improvement at second asking. Obviously needs to improve quite a bit. But hey, if I said nice things about Shopper's Revenge, I shouldn't be too critical of Sun Thunder.
Similar type form. Another one who's running this weekend up next.
Tapit Shoes, one of the 2 Tapit runners that we're going to talk about among the next 3. He is entered in the one other than tomorrow on the Lecomte card, a half-brother of 2022 Haskell Invitational and Arkansas Derby winner Cyberknife. Was very impressive at second asking, improved quite a bit on any measurable speed figure, improved 20 points in Timeform US, 22 on the Beyer speed figure scale. So we'll see if Tapit Shoes has another forward move in him tomorrow.
Nothing to add there. We'll just go right to the other one going to be turning up in that allowance race. Number 33, Tapit Trice. This horse, a much narrower maiden winner last day. This one at Aqueduct but the figure came back pretty strong for a late season 2-year-old figure. At least looking at the Briss scale here, all to find out. Just like so many of these. Not going to argue too much if you're in the boat, but I mean at 30-1 the morning line. If that guess is right, I just think there's probably more appealing options elsewhere in this pool.
Yeah, after his maiden win last time out, I kind of penciled him in my head as Pletcher's Derby or as Pletcher's Belmont horse. Just a really grindy, very hard trying horse. The Dam Donzatrice was a really nice router who won some stakes races, ended up in the care of Steve Asmussen. So I believe we're going to see Tapitrice next in the Withers. Tapit's Conquest is the other Tapit that is going to be in the allowance race tomorrow at Fairgrounds. So, of course, keep an eye on those 3 horses running in the 9th and the allowance, and then a couple of horses in this pool that are in the Lecomte. Tapit's Conquest was a lot like his stablemate Tapit Shoes, ran a very strong race at second asking. Now, he ran really well on debut also. So it was a matter of him not really taking much of a step forward, but he came out of a good-looking maiden race at Saratoga. Full Moon Madness came right back and won his next start. Powerful ultimately became a stakes winner at Churchill Downs as well. I'm a little skeptical as to how good Tapit's Conquest is. And I mean, I think he's 9-2 on the morning line in the allowance race tomorrow. So he's still got a lot to prove.
Yeah, I feel like the others we've talked about from there might make a little bit more intrigue. Let's talk about number 35, Two Fills. This is a horse that Eric DeCoster made a bit of an interesting case for, coming out of that very dominant Street Sense victory. That was in the slop. Can this horse replicate a figure like that on the dry, do you think?
Going to be the real question, right? I mean, it's a horse from a high percentage barn. He's been kind of gingerly campaigned now, having been given some time off. You wonder how will the slop affect him? How will he whether he'll take a step forward as a 3-year-old, because his 2-year-old races were good, they weren't great, and he'll need to get a little bit better. Next up, we have Verifying, who's the son of Justify, the 2018 Kentucky Derby winner. This one is a half to Midnight Bizu. We talked extensively about Verifying back on Tuesday with his big maiden win last week. I know Pete and I discussed the topic of whether Lasix may have moved Verifying forward. So our buy, sell, hold on Verifying at 50-1.
Ooh, that's a fun game. I think I'm buying, because I think there's enough question that figure should be faster. Did you have any chance to look at that figure and come up with some guess as a figure maker yourself at times what you would have made it?
So pace wise, he was not. So unlike Kingsbarns, it is a pace ugly figure. So Kingsbarns is a pace pretty figure. And so this was not a fast-paced race. And so he took the worst of it figure-wise on the Brisnet number, on the Timeform US number, but his buyer figure's huge. So looks like the buyer figure, that's Randy Moss playing it straight as far as final time figures go. It definitely erased the memory of his poor Breeders' Cup Juvenile run, and maybe he's a horse that's taken a big step forward as a 3-year-old. Again, his next race is going to be very, very important.
And LASIK's off, presumably, right?
LASIK's off, presumably, if it's in a Derby prep. Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to be. I'd be interested. Answer your own question. 50-1, buy, sell, hold.
I'm a sell at 50-1. Need one more.
Gotcha.
Need a little bit more price.
37 is Victory Formation, who we have touched on coming out of that Smarty Jones win and has had this form franked in several places. Another one where there's some disagreement about the figures. No Tapit this time in the first line of the pedigree. You got to go back to the sire of the sire, who's Tapit in this case. I think this horse is intriguing. I don't think I'm buying it 30-1 this time around, but certainly if I was making a short list of 3-year-olds whose next starts I'm most excited to see, Victory Formation is going to be somewhere in the top 5.
Yeah, the concern is that he's going to land in a race loaded with speed, and it's going to be a lot harder for him. But this is a horse I think it's pretty clear they have high hopes for, and they should, right? I mean, he's 3 for 3. He was tremendously game in winning that 1-other-than-2 back over Lugan Knight, and came back with an improved performance. So feels like a horse where kind of the sky's the limit.
He's finished okay enough that I was hoping he wasn't a need the lead type. That was sort of baked into my excitement about it. But you think there's a chance he really needs to be there?
He's probably a horse that's going to be better with the lead, like most speed horses. And I just wonder, when we get to that first opportunity where he sees a little adversity, if he'll end up being quite the same. The final of the 38 runners entered in the pool is Wildatlanticstorm, who is currently stabled at Sam Houston. So I should let everybody know this horse has been given 30 days off. So he is very, very unlikely to make the Kentucky Derby, which is a shame because Ray Ashford is a small-time trainer who does a really good job. And this is a horse that he's probably been waiting for. The good thing is that I think he'll have some opportunities later in the year. He stretched out effectively when he won the Springboard Mile last time out. A Jim Jorgensen Iowa homebred. Pretty tough not to root for the underdog in this spot, but hopefully he'll get well pretty quickly. But again, as of earlier this week, according to Mary Rampolini's story, he will be given 30 days off.
Let's move on to these last 2 categories that we have. Eric DeCoster on the website once again does a good job of breaking down who we're really dealing with in these. And we'll start with 39, the 3-year-old fillies category. Who do you think is the most interesting runner to potentially come in this group?
There were a couple of 2-year-old fillies that looked good last year that ran fast figures. One got hurt, Prank, and one was Money's Gold, who is coming back, I think, today for Todd Pletcher. I don't get the Wonder Wheel chatter at all. I think Mark Cassie does an incredible job as his own publicist and says things like that so that people talk about his horses. She would get drowned in a 1-other-than for fillies right now. So I don't see her really having much of a shot. And I've seen some chatter on Hoosier Philly as well. Maybe that means that Tom Amos is pretty fond of Curly Jack, but I don't think a filly's going to have much of a chance this year.
The numbers don't seem to justify it. Now, the other category, the all others, this includes the entire Baffert flotilla, which would be led by Cave Rock, but far from the only one. You've got big figures from Hijazi, and Arabian Night, National Treasure, Reincarnate, Newgate. It's a very hard question, but what price is appropriate for this category this year? This will be the favorite. You got to figure sizably, but how short?
Even money, probably somewhere around there. Yeah, you're talking about a lot of horses,
right?
And it's sort of like is the public being done a disservice by betting some of these other horses whose prices probably are higher because the field is going to go low. Historically, and prior to the last few years, this was the first pool, and the field was always an enormous favorite. There wasn't usually a fall Derby future wager. Churchill's done an amazing job making the Derby basically a year-round conversation and starting it in the fall. So yeah, I mean, knowing all the power that he has out there, it's pretty tough not to envision the field as a very, very heavy favorite.
And it makes me think, as we get to our conclusion here, that the funny, and I could be dead wrong and the price will tell us, but there might be a funny wise guy play, like anti-wise guy play on a horse like Forte in this pool. If they go nuts betting this all others, and you really can get, I'm probably going to draw the line at 10-1. I probably don't need to go shorter, but that might be my answer to the question of, I'm not eligible obviously to win the free bet if you put your pick here on the comments on YouTube, but I might go for that if you could get 10-1. Where would you go if I made you pick one of these, or if I gave you the opportunity, I should say, to pick one of these? Where would you head?
Oh, I'd take one of the horses that was 80-1 or better. Knowing that I have sort of, I'm at least double to triple the price of them even getting there. My personal opinion on Forte is that the pack's going to catch up to him. Mm-hmm. I don't think he has the dynamic style, the brilliance that you need in order to be a fast 2-year-old to go forward as a 3-year-old. Nyquist comes to mind, having been an undefeated 2-year-old. Forte's not undefeated, but having been an undefeated 2-year-old that went on as a 3-year-old and was at least good enough to win the Derby. And he was a speed horse that kind of he could bring his racetrack with him. He didn't need to bring his racetrack with him. Rather, he could do anything. And Forte just doesn't seem like that type. I get the feeling that he's going to lose one of his 2 preps, and he's probably going to be about 12-1 in the Derby.
That's fair.
I'd let him run once and then sort of reassess.
Kingsbarns was one you mentioned. Who else would be on your short?
Kingsbarns, Rocket Ken. They would be Shopper's Conquest would be my Shopper's Revenge would be my 3 that I would consider at 80-1 or better.
My longer shot, I gotta give something here that's a little bit more of a price. Giant Mischief, if the price is big enough, I could see going in that direction as well. All right, we're going to wrap the YouTube portion of this show. If you're listening on audio, we're going to go to a break and be right back with the Golden Hour Pick 4 analysis. We encourage folks to check us out wherever you get your podcast. Nick, thanks for this segment. I'll see you on the other side of the break.
You bet, my friend. Talk to you soon.